So welcome. Good evening, everybody. We have an hour and a half planned for this meeting tonight. Go ahead and start with the first slide there. We'll start with some introductions and a brief project update. Then we have our design team here to talk about the facility and site layout design progress. We'll be sharing some highlights from your survey feedback on our initial layout concepts, and then have some time during the meeting to discuss our ideas or your ideas and input as a group. Let's go to the next slide here. So as a quick refresher, if you're joining our meeting using Zoom or a computer, you can see at the bottom of your screen, there is a few tools for you to help navigate through this. We ask that when you're not speaking, you keep your mic on mute and your video turned off. It helps to keep with the bandwidth for everybody. But when you are speaking, feel free to turn on your camera. It's always nice to see a face that goes with a voice. If you have ideas to share, just use your raise your hand tool, or you can type in the chat. Our presenters will pause along the way to invite input from the advisors. We've also left some time at the end of our meeting for comments from everyone after we wrap up the initial presentations. So let's go to the next slide here. So let's see. Along with our advisors, we have several guests listening into our meeting, and we're asking our audience to help us prioritize time for our site advisor input during the presentation portion of our meeting. We value your input, and during the presentation portion of our meeting, we want to also recognize that our site advisors have made a commitment to be a part of this beyond the meeting time, so we want to honor that. As I mentioned earlier, though, we will have time for additional comments and questions before we end the meeting. So let's find out who is here from the site advisor group. You know the drill, guys. So I'll ask you your name and ask you to briefly introduce yourself. And with school starting soon, please tell us, what is your favorite subject in school? I'm going to start because I know there's some new people in the room. I'm Benita Oswald, and I'm coordinating the communications for this project. And my favorite subject is social studies. Let's see who we got down the line here. I see Mike Cowan.
Hi, here it's Mike Cowan, and for me it was history.
Oh, very nice. Sean.
Hi, Sean Narrison, Surface Nursery. I'd have to say my favorite subject was probably science, biology, that type of thing.
Oh, yes, very cool. Pat, new back to the group.
If you want Pat Fiedler or...
Oh, sorry, Pat Meyer.
Oh, okay, just a minute. I'll get
Okay.
it.
You could always be me, Pat, if you want. Pat Meyer, and my favorite subject was business.
All right, cool. Well, I'll go back to the other Pat now, because we have two Pats. We actually have two Mikes too.
Okay, my name is Patricia Fiedler, and my favorite subject was accounting.
Oh, accounting, good one. A lot of math. Jane.
Jane Whitehead, and I had two favorite subjects. I'd liked mathematics and physics.
Oh, that kind of surprises me for you. I don't know why I would have thought something artistic for you.
I am a right brain, left brain, yes.
Yeah.
But in school, that was not permitted. My parents said those were Mickey Mouse courses.
Oh, that's too bad. Daniel.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Daniel Newberry, representing the Johnson Creek Watershed Council. I'm the executive director there. Favorite subject? I definitely was and continue to be a science guy. Probably would have been chemistry because I love to do unauthorized experiments in the laboratory.
That's great. All right, let's see, who else do we have here? Pat. Pat Holt.
Hi, Bonita. Hello, everybody. Sorry I came a little late. Had some irrigation issues I had to get going. So, and if you can see my background, pardon the disaster. We're in the process of remodeling the office at the moment. So, glad to be here. I'll see what happens tonight.
Yeah. What's your favorite subject? I'm guessing construction.
My favorite subject. I'm sorry, in school or what?
Yeah, in school. Yeah.
Oh, well, that would probably be sports and drinking beer, but you know, I did like history. That was one of my favorites.
Good,
So.
good. All right, let's see. I think I've covered all of the advisors. Did I miss any of the advisors? Speak up if I have, that are here so far.
Did you get Carol? Carol Coast?
Oh, Carol. No, I did not. Carol.
And Mike.
And Mike. Carol and Mike.
Carol Coast and Mike Coast. I must say my favorite subject was music in school.
Oh, very good. Did you have a favorite instrument?
Piano.
Oh, good. All right. So we do have some guests here today, but I'm going to start with Sandra. I'm just going to list off your names because we're just we want to get through this meeting. But we have Sandra and I think and David, and I think that's all that we have for our guests today. We'll see if anybody else shows up. We had about 5 people that RSVP'd, so there may be people that show up as we go along. For our presenters today, we have David Peters. Oh, somebody's got a phone ringing. If you wouldn't mind muting yourself, that'd be great. We'll start with, actually I'm going to save David for last because he's going to be speaking next, so we'll save him for last. But we also have Casey.
Hi, I'm Casey Hagerman with MWA Architects, and my favorite subject was English.
Oh, good. We also have Jason.
My name is Jason Hurst. I'm a landscape architect with NNA Landscape Architecture, and I loved shop class when I was in school.
I think maybe Pat Holt could use your help right now. Look at that remodel. How about Jeff?
Howdy, good evening. Jeff McGraw, architect and site design lead for this project. I think I really was a mediocre student during high school, but I excelled in music and art, science, and shop class.
Yeah, good. Good. All right. That's perfect for an architect, I think. So you have to have all 3 of those things. Let's see, who else? We have Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben Nahn with NNA Landscape Architecture. My favorite class would be history now, but when I was in college, that was the only course that I ever flunked.
Good. All right. Well, I think that's everybody, and except for David. So I'm going to turn this over to David now to go to the next slide there. Aubrey, make sure I'm on the right track for the project update. Yep. Go ahead, David.
Okay. I'm David Peters. I'm the program director for the Portland Water Bureau. I'm glad to be here with you again tonight, and I appreciate you all being here on this beautiful evening. I just have a couple quick slides here to provide a program update and talk a little bit about a summary from our last meeting, which was talking about pipelines, so that we can get into the meat of the topic, which I know everyone is here, is waiting to hear. So just some brief updates. It's been a busy summer for us. I've mentioned we've been working from home. and that's been going well for the project team. We have several things that we've been working on. So starting with the planning for an online open house. So coming up here the first 2 weeks of September, we want to continue gathering your feedback and feedback from your neighbors on the topics we've been talking about these several months. And so that'll be a virtual open house where we'd like to continue getting your input even beyond tonight, the subjects we're talking about tonight and past meetings. So there's been a lot of work going into that, and we're looking forward to sharing that with you coming up in early September. And then we've been continuing to work in the field, looking at details of getting information about potential pipeline routes, and there'll be some additional work going on in this coming week related to that. So we're still doing surveys, environmental surveys, topographic surveys, and looking at lots of different elements there. We're working to identify those preferred pipe routes, so we can narrow it down to just one route that we'll be designing and be able to provide details for our design firm, which will be coming on board later this fall. We have been working with the Environmental Protection Agency negotiating our WIFIA loan, and things have been going well on that agreement, and it looks like we are close to being able to close on that in October. And then we're working on negotiating contracts with our pipeline designer, which will be Jacobs Engineers, and our filtration facility contractor, which is a joint venture of MWH Constructors and Kiewit Construction. And we're also working on reports to document all the work that we've been doing. We have a project definition report coming up in the fall, and then a basis of design report that's coming up in just after the first of the year. And that basis of design report will be the guidance document that will provide information for our design firm for the filtration facility, which is Stantec Engineers. So next slide. So at our last meeting, we talked about the pipeline route alternatives, and there were a wide range of alternatives, both for the raw water and the finished water that were talked about. Some of the key things that we heard, or preferences we heard at the last meeting, were avoiding alternative 3C, and that alternative was taking one of the pipelines down Carpenter Lane from our site all the way to Altman Road. And so we heard that was not a preferred alternative going forward, and it'd be better to put both those pipelines into Dodge Park Boulevard. And if possible, we wanted to avoid adding sidewalk to existing roadways. The understanding that begins to make things feel more urban and gets from the character of the neighborhoods. And we also heard that to the extent that we can, that putting our easements and pipelines along property boundaries is the best way to go, so that we don't use large portions of properties and make pieces of property less usable because of where our pipes are located. So we've internalized that feedback and provided that to our design firms, and you'll hear more about that as we get into the designs. So I think that's my overview. I don't know, Benita, if you're coming back on to introduce Casey, or you want me to do that?
Well, you're already there. Go ahead.
Okay. Unless there's any other questions about what I presented, I will introduce Casey Hagerman with MWA Architects, and he's going to get us started in talking about our site utilization and what we're thinking of in terms of laying this facility out on the site. So take it away, Casey.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I'm here to give you some quick updates about architecture and some of the sound, height, and access progress we're making in our design efforts. First off, we've been continuing our work on architectural and site design. And as we do that, we share in a pretty continuous feedback your preferences from the site advisory group with the Water Bureau and our design team. And right now there's a general consensus with everyone about the best styles to use for these buildings. And those are the agrarian and Pacific Northwest styles. And so we continue to test ways of combining elements of these two styles for facility components like roofs, cladding materials, and colors. And we're just starting those architectural studies of that style. We haven't made any hard decisions about roofs yet, but you'll see some ideas tonight in the schematic concepts. We're also using the Columbia Gorge Design Guidelines to help inform us with some best practices for things like building colors and materials, the best way to screen these facilities, and just taking some useful tips from that nearby sensitive area. So in doing this, we are working towards the Basis of Design report where we will outline our facility design guidelines so that going into detailed design next year, we have a kind of a roadmap on how to proceed. And for things that we've discussed before, like lighting, we haven't gotten too much further in our lighting design, but we are going to be working to meet the dark sky standards that we discussed several months ago, and that'll serve as our guide for lighting. Next slide, please. We're starting to do some high-level analysis around the sound impacts from our facility, the anticipated equipment, be it pumps and electrical equipment or building HVAC equipment, and then external noises like truck traffic. And our general strategy is to use the design limits set out in the code that we discussed several months ago as sort of our guideline. And we've got a lot of best practices that we're going to implement, like shown in the bullet points on this page. And as design progresses, we will engage with the team's acoustic engineer, who will be able to model the anticipated equipment and locations of that equipment on the site, and then be able to tell us at the property line what that decibel reading will probably be. And then we can adjust our design accordingly to meet or exceed the code limits to, do our best to maintain the nice, quiet country feel out there. So next slide. Another concern, of course, is facility heights. And as noted in past meetings, the Multnomah County Code does set out a 35-foot height limit in general. And the way that this is measured, to provide you a little more background, is if you have a flat roof, wherever the top of the roof is will be your 35-foot height limit. But if you have a gabled roof or a pitched roof, the code measures that height to what they call the average of the slope, which is basically halfway up the slope. And so you see in this diagram, the 35-foot height limit would be measured to the middle of that gabled roof, which then ends up allowing a few more feet to the very top of the ridge. There are some exceptions to the 35-foot height limit, as you probably see in your own community already. Facilities like barns, silos, and antennas are allowed to exceed that height. And we will have some components on the site, as you'll see in our perspective images, such as There's some chemical storage silos that will likely exceed the 35-foot height limit. And we're looking into the possibility of having a communications tower, which you'll see on these images. And we're still studying these components, these tall components like the communications tower. And what you will see tonight should be a worst case scenario in terms of how tall that antenna would be or where it would be placed on site. And so we wanted to kind of put out there the worst case, and we're working and already have some good design that will tell us if we can make it smaller and the best place to put it so that it's not an eyesore.
Casey, I just wanted to note that we got a question from Daniel Newberry, who has, he says that many municipalities in Oregon use a sound standard of a maximum decibel a certain distance away from the sound source. Why will the sound limits be from the property boundary?
It's a good question. Multnomah County Code measures measures decibel levels from a sound source at the neighboring property line. So the closest neighbor in Multnomah County, that sound will be measured at their property line. A little different for folks in Clackamas County, where the decibel level is actually measured, I think it's 3 feet from outside of a window that contains a dwelling unit. So a house with a bedroom, the sound will be measured a little bit closer to your house so that there's a little discrepancy in how things are measured. Most of the neighbors around this site with houses are in Multnomah County. So we kind of just took that property line measurement as sort of the base case for how we would prove or test our sound levels. Hopefully that answered your question. Just to wrap up facility height, our dewatering and chemical buildings are the tallest facilities you'll see on our plans, and we are working on strategies to make sure they fit in with that height limit, and we don't have to get any break any rules there. Next slide, please. Site access. This subject is also is being studied as we speak. We have a team of planners and civil engineers looking at access points. We spoke with you about this topic in a past meeting, and right now the 2 site accesses are still on the table. One is off of Dodge Park Boulevard from the north, circled on this diagram, and the other access point is off of Bluff Road from the south. So the team is still studying where exactly and how exactly we get from these roads to the site. And there's a lot of design challenges with both of these access points. From the north, there's a steep embankment to come up even to get to the level of the site. And then crossing over Carpenter Lane and where that happens is under scrutiny right now from our team. Coming from the south, the current thinking is that the access point is going to be a little closer to the eastern edge of our property where the red circle is. This is a little closer to the Cottrell area, the school and such. And what we're trying to do is provide that access along our property line to avoid cutting through the agricultural land of Surface Nursery to our south, and to also enter our site on the eastern edge, if possible, to reserve as much undisturbed, continuous agricultural land on the eastern edge of our site. And Jason's going to talk a little bit more about that later. So these do have challenges, the grades, the impacts to traffic, and the impacts to neighbors along the route of the access roads. And we welcome any discussion about that tonight. We're still working out how to use these access points. though the thinking right now is that one will be a primary entry and exit point during operations, and one would be an emergency exit, and that potentially both would be used temporarily for construction. And so we're still looking at how those options work out and what those impacts will be. So that's it for my updates. We have some more updates about landscape coming up with Jason and Ben.
Okay, before we move on to that, Pat Meyer has a question. I'm not sure that I understand it, but so you may just let us know what your question is, but it has to do with the communications tower. Pat Meyer?
Sorry.
No problem.
It's easier for me to just talk than type it out.
Okay.
So this is the first that I've seen or heard of a communication tower, and I recognize that the site advisory group has been going on since before I joined. So I'm actually kind of surprised, though, to see it. It's the first of any kind of communication that I've heard of that a communication tower was being considered for this location. I would like information on that tower. What is it? Is it to be leased out? Who is doing that? Why was a tower chosen? The site ground level view of that is significantly higher than the existing water towers. And what type of tower is it specifically? Thank you.
I only have so much knowledge about that. What I can say is that the potential of a communication tower being needed was identified in the last year's preliminary design report, and I see Jeff has probably a better grasp on how to answer your question.
I don't know if I can answer the purpose of this. It's communication. It's communication. It's not specifically for any cell towers or cell range or any outside customers. This is basically communication between the plant and headworks. The need for the tower was laid out in the early documents. This is the first time we've shown it, folks, and I think Pat, not only you, or a lot of other people were sort of surprised to see it in its current state. So when we go through some of the site options, at this point, I think we'll talk about how that conversation has evolved a bit. Hopefully answer your questions.
And Jeff, I might just add to that you're asking for details, and those details are still being worked out. At this point, it was mentioned that the tower was identified in some of our earlier documents, and there being a need for it. We are still working out, what the height would be, what kind of tower it would be, and where it would actually be on the site. And those are some of the things that we wanted to start in the conversation tonight. That's why it was shown on one of the options, and is to get feedback from this group about their impressions of what that current looks like as shown. So there will be a lot more coming on that as we go forward, as there's still a lot of details to work out. So.
Okay, I understand. I'm just I'll just be honest with you, throwing a big metal tower in the middle of an agricultural field that's interfering with the view of the mountain is just completely unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. So I hope that if that's something that you feel a need to incorporate, that you will seriously consider how that is going to impact the look. You can go through all this wonderful building design and then have a big metal tower stuck smack in the middle of the field. That completely, it changes everything.
We understand your comment, and we will be talking about that some more tonight. We have been thinking about
Okay.
that ourselves, and
Thank you.
have some things to share on that. So
Thank you.
thank you for sharing it.
All right, well, so now we'll move on to Ben and Jason.
Okay, this is Ben. I'm going to start off and just sort of orient us. So we're on slide 14. So in an earlier site advisory meeting, we presented landscape concepts for the edges and buffers, and Jason's going to review the progress on those in a minute. We took those concepts and we presented them to the Water Bureau in the landscape design workshop that we held last month, and they pretty much validated them. Today, we're going to sort of begin to talk about the landscape design the way we did in that workshop, and we've organized the site into two areas. We'll refer to them as inside the fence and outside the fence. The fence I'm talking about would be essentially a high security fence around the process facility, the facility area itself. And we intend to, and just to note now that we intend to screen that fence from view from neighbors in the road. After Jason reviews the landscape concepts, we'll talk a little bit more about the physical security of the site just briefly. And one other thing I want to mention is that we show an area in the southeast corner of the site that's potentially going to be unused for this facility. And we're considering that for the reintroduction of agriculture after construction. And this is a preliminary thing. It still needs to, discussion needs to still take place within the Water Bureau. So Jason, can you take it away?
Thank you, Ben. All right, can you go to the next slide, please? All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about screening at the site edges and buffers. So this is the area outside of the process facilities of the plant. And in our earlier meetings, we presented some concepts and tried to get feedback from you guys on what you preferred. And we took what we thought we heard and reviewed it with Portland Water Bureau to come up with what we think are the most effective solutions for screening. So number one is the idea of berms or land forming. Berms are going to be our most effective way to manage views and noise that are coming from the site, particularly from process elements that are roads or other elements that are creating noise on site. We think berms are most likely going to be placed along the south and west edges of the process facilities. And when we place these berms, we're going to try to keep in mind the distant views and positive views and try to allow visual access to those wherever possible. And the current thinking, my understanding is the current thinking, the landforms in the eastern portion of the site aren't going to be significantly regraded, or we're not putting in significant berms in that location. The landscape plantings and vegetation are going to be another tool we use for screening. We want to try to fit in with the surrounding character as best we can. And we think a preferred way to do that with vegetation is with either native trees and understory that matches with this adjacent parcels. And we also heard that some type of meadow or an open field with clusters of trees may be acceptable also. So we want to use those kind of different vegetation types to either screen or allow views in the best manner possible. We will also have stormwater locations on the site that are going to be most likely located in the west, southwest, and southeast areas of the site due to the way the existing topography works and the adjacent landforms. And those, we haven't totally worked out what the vegetation in those is going to be yet, but they most likely will have some vegetation in them. So next slide, please. All right. Next, I'm going to talk about landscape character both outside the fence, and then I'm going to move on to character inside the fence.
Hey, Jason, before we move on to that, Daniel Newberry has a question about what the current levels of the runoff to Johnson Creek are.
Okay.
Is that something that you know off the top?
I'll chime in and say we don't know that. That's a very hard thing to answer. We had a discussion with a civil engineer, Mariel Design, this morning, and that's one of their charges to figure out, essentially. So we just, at least Jason and I don't really have an answer, and I'm not sure MWA has one either specifically.
So yeah, and Amerio is currently working on calculating the estimated runoff from each of those different basins on site. And I believe our current thinking is to manage stormwater in a way that matches with the current drainage pattern and levels.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, folks, is that we're now in our third Stormwater Summit meeting. It's a very important subject on site, and I think the strategy here is to really do no harm, match the existing runoff from the site that we know feeds some of the ponds in the area as well. So as everyone has said, it's very difficult to quantify that exactly, but there's been quite a bit of discussion so far, and it will continue for the next several weeks.
Okay, so I hope that helped, Daniel. All right.
Actually, if I could just follow up, I'd like to recommend that over this winter, that maybe at least some visual monitoring be done to see what the overland flow is like, because I think we, like what you said about the feeding of the ponds, it'll be important to make sure we don't have any additional component of surface flow, and hopefully those BMPs you'll be building will help to infiltrate water on site so that there'll still be a groundwater component feeding into the regional ponds.
All right, thank you for the comment.
Okay, yes, thank you. I just also want to acknowledge that Pat Holt has a question.
Yeah, I do. And actually the visual is fairly unnecessary because I know where all the water goes. It goes right through the middle of my farm. And that's kind of been one of my big question marks on this whole thing is you guys know where it's going to go. How are you going to get it to Johnson Creek? That's the big question. Is that what you're trying to figure out?
Mm-hmm. That's correct. We believe we have a pretty good understanding of how stormwater will be handled on site. It's the next step after that. We're still doing calculation and research on.
Are you gonna maybe contact me at some point in time? Because it's gonna go right through the middle of my place, and you know it. Unless you decide to pump it somewhere else and send it to the Sandy River, or up over the top to the what would that be? The southwest corner of the property, over the top of the hill.
So you're talking about the property south of the Water Bureau site, correct?
I'm directly west, and two of my container yards are right in the middle of the drainage that I've worked for years to control the runoff off of that piece of property. So I know where it all goes, and it makes one heck of a mess. And I know you're going to have parking lots, the landscape, and potential spillage involved in all this runoff. So I've been very concerned with how are you going to manage this, and what are you going to do to me to get it through my property?
I think
Ben, there's two places stormwater leaves the site currently, through Pat's property and along Johnson Creek. So he's talking specifically about that.
90% of it goes through my property. A very small portion goes down into Johnson Creek. My drainage through my two ponds ends up in Johnson Creek within oh, I think it's like 150, 200 feet from my property line.
Okay.
So it's got to get through me to there somehow. Otherwise, you're gonna have to pump it up over the top of the terrain and down into the other direction into Johnson Creek by my other quarter acre of well property.
Okay. We will talk to you, definitely.
Good. That's kind of important to me at this point in time, even though it's going to be a couple years down the road.
Yeah, I think we want to strategize with whatever what your goal is, and also Daniel, for the Johnson Creek watershed. I think we want to be pretty sensitive to understand any problems that are currently happening, and whether there's more flow, less flow, or the same amount of flow coming off the site.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Great to have you on the advisory group to hear all this great insight. So I'm not seeing any additional hands, and if you're going to raise your hand or lower your hand, Pat, that way we know when you're ready to ask your next question or comment.
I also saw another comment that popped up that said stormwater leaves the site through the southeast portion also.
Yes, runoff also comes through our property on the east, so that must be Pat Walter. Welcome.
So we're aware that's another drainage pattern on the site, and that's another thing we'll be aware of. And just to reiterate, the strategy we want to take is to try to keep the stormwater on our site to match the existing conditions, and not modify what is leaving, the amount that is leaving the site at any one time. So try to match the existing condition as best possible.
Also, we understand that you as the property owner to the southeast corner are experiencing what you don't want right now. And so again, we'll talk to you as well about what we need to do. Right now, we are showing a stormwater facility there as a, let's call it a placeholder, but what we want to do is improve the condition there, at least to offer some kind of reservoir to hold water, or when there's a large volume storm happening.
Okay. All right, I'm going to get back to talking about landscape character. Landscape character outside of the fence, I mentioned we're looking at moving forward with kind of a more native forest understory concept, or some type of meadow to allow us to screen or allow views wherever is needed. So these are really good to help, we think, to help fit in with the character of their surrounding site, as well as support habitat value. So next slide, please. All right, next I'm going to talk about the areas inside the fence, or the things that are more closely associated with the process areas of the facility. We also want to integrate local landscape character in these areas, but we have additional considerations we got to think about when we're designing for this portion. For this part of the site, appearance and visual access are very important. So we want things to be easy to see, access, and maintain. We are keeping in mind fire safety setbacks and security buffers. So we're going to incorporate those where needed. But we do want to use native plants or low resource use alternatives when we can. Lawn alternatives are something we are talking about. Drought tolerant plants and other sustainable measures are going to help us hit our sustainability targets. Stormwater management areas also require landscape and vegetation, and those generally have more exacting requirements than standard landscape. Maintenance requirements are higher, and appearance has to be maintained. But again, a preference for native or low resource use plants is preferred. Next slide, please. So within the facility itself, buildings, pavings, additional usable space takes up a lot of room. But we're going to try to incorporate landscape where we can. We developed some diagrams to take to Portland Water Bureau and discuss them with them. We showed them several different concepts, and not surprisingly, what came out of it was a preference for a type of hybrid scheme. And what seems to be preferred is that next to buildings, there's going to be some more type of more open type space, perhaps a meadow type planting, or a more managed type landscape, as you see in the image on the bottom. And then as you get farther away from the buildings, it'll transition to kind of a more native character. And again, when we look at how we lay out these different types of landscapes, we want to incorporate our fire buffers and our safety requirements, and also think about our sustainability requirements. So next slide. All right, I think Ben was going to talk about this slide.
So, find my notes. So we presented these images at an earlier site advisory meeting too. Actually, we didn't. I think MWA did. And these were also presented at the landscape design workshop with the Water Bureau, just to get them validated. The lower photo shows a high security fence that's likely 8 feet high. And at the landscape workshop, it was said to us by Water Bureau, might actually want to be even stouter than that. Anyway, we intend to screen this fence with berming and dense vegetation, so it wouldn't be visible from neighbors or the road. This example that we're showing is actually at Portland's wastewater treatment plant on North Columbia Boulevard. The upper image is probably something you might see if we choose to implement it. It's a less secure fence, and it's really up for grabs what it is, and we're showing an example that might be typical to the farms in the community if we implement it. There might be some property lines that we simply don't need to mark with a fence if need be, and that's up for discussion for later. So that ends our presentation. Bonita?
All righty, so now we have Jeff up next to talk about the layout concepts.
My favorite subject. Next, please. So we have sent along a couple different options that we're looking at, what we call North Campus and South Campus. We got some great feedback from you guys, from the neighbors and advisory group meeting, a group in general. Setting the facilities back from the edges, screening using landforms and tree plantings, keeping the site as close as possible to current grade. We have some ideas on site access. They really differentiate the two options. The basins are finally more than just puzzle pieces in the last time we got together. We'll talk about that in a minute. Reserving eastern area of the property for more of a utilitarian use, or returning it back to agriculture, as Ben and Jason discussed, and also thinking about community uses like trails and things like that along site edges. Next, please. So we are currently looking at two different options, and what we're trying to do is really distill the best things of these options into a kind of a preferred option before the end of the year. And it's going to go into our basis of design report. And from there, historically, it has morphed into even more refinements. But the things that differentiate these two options are, the one on the left, the North Campus, has more of an emphasis towards a north entrance. You can see the admin building really on the north side there. On the right, the South Campus has something as an organizing feature. There is the strong road and the admin maintenance campus of buildings on the south. And we're also sort of using this as kind of an experiment. The left side has kind of mechanical basins. Those are overflow basins, and some of the other smaller stormwater basins. And the one on the right is more organic, maybe more well adapted to the landforms. But The other thing to think about is that both of these options, the finished water reservoir, and I can't really point here, is on the west edge. And one is kind of orthogonal north-south and has a green roof over it. The other one is more of a 45 degrees to that. So some interesting things here. Obviously, the tower sits in a very prominent location on the north campus, and you'll see that in some of the views. And I think that really shaded some of the feedback we got in terms of not liking that option. Next, please. And this really relates to that. The North Campus got far worse reviews, shall we say, than the South Campus. We think it had a lot to do with that tower. And the perception that the North Campus was somehow better in terms of berming and hiding the facility. Next, please. So this is the North Campus, and this is kind of a diagonal layout. This is kind of a rendering of that. You can see it has kind of a north entrance as a priority. It also has the communication tower here in the lower right-hand corner, which is quite large. It places the taller buildings nearer the tree line, and we still like this idea. The taller buildings being the chemical buildings, and the dewatering building, which is, they're listed as chem and dewatering. You can see those sort of in the middle of the page. And the idea here, if you push things up against that tree line and still observe sort of fire breaks and things like that, that those would be more in keeping with the Columbia Gorge guidelines and sort of die into those view sheds. The overflow basins are sort of finding their place in the lower parts of the site, and those are placed in these options. We've also included some graphic descriptions of berms and trees to screen views, but that's the north. Next. And you can see this is a SketchUp view. It's an aerial, and you can see these sort of mechanical basins and how this thing is sort of canted about 45 degrees off of north. The real defining feature of this, I think, is really the north prominent exit entrance and egress. And you can see sort of a line of trees there. Again, it's not really designed. It's just, put it in the SketchUp model to shade some views off of Carpenter Lane. There's been some comments from the neighbors on Carpenter Lane. Looks like it goes right through my property or right by my property. We have some discretion as to where that road goes, and as it comes off of Dodge Park and not off of Carpenter Lane, but still crosses Carpenter Lane. Also in this option, that big communications tower and the existing water towers. Next, please. So you can see these survey results as well. Effectiveness of the North Campus concept screening. In the next, and Casey, I'm going to keep talking here about those views, okay? Because he was going to talk about the views, but we're short on time. So next, please. Again, I think what's prominent in these views, this is from Carpenter Lane, is that, the water tower's on the right and the, what looks like an oil rig. and I think this is about the ugliest thing we could find to put there. And unfortunately, I think it really tendered some of the views here. And we've had further discussions about that to, essentially establish the overall height of this tower, put it up against the trees, ideally next to the conifers, so that it matches colors and things like that. So it really doesn't stand out like it does in these views. Next, please. Again, very prominent feature looking northwest from the neighbor's property there. But you can see this is sort of gently rolling hillsides. You can see some of the buildings in white next to the tower. This is not intended to be white buildings. They are just a function of preliminary modeling techniques that we use. Next, please. I think the landscape architects have added some of the existing trees in here, and they are a little bit more representational of the actual heights of those trees. But this one, looking from Bluff, you're looking uphill. You can see some of those white buildings, some of the larger buildings. North has a cover on the filters some of you made comments about that. And you can see some of the filter covers and some of the larger facilities, but they pale in terms of size to the tower and in terms of the compared to the water towers as well. So I think we have some real opportunities with landforms and with new screening techniques to at least hide most of those buildings as we progress. Next, please. Another view, several comments saying where's Mount Hood? Our intention is to show you in our next views. We'll always have Mount Hood in the picture. I know that's very, very important. It would be important to me if I lived in this neighborhood. Obviously, this tower is placed in the exact wrong location to screen Mount Hood, but it's approximately in that location. We all know that with the air density that Mount Hood looks even larger or smaller depending on the weather. But that's the approximate location in this particular view. Next, please. Let me go to my bigger text here. Okay, site advisor comments. Like the abundance of trees. More trees looking west. They like, from Carpenter Lane, views from the west can be more shielded. Just like the more spread out layout of this particular option. There's the prominent tower comments. It blocks the mountain view. Dislike use of eastern lot without including room for agriculture. I think we agree with that. Would change south access road, design locations, dislike paved roads so close to the neighbors and school. Yeah, the site egress onto Bluff Road, running along that property edge, we know that's something that is up for discussion at this point. We've heard some negative feedback about that as well. Covered filter units. This was something we experimented with in option A, and we did cover the filters. That is still up for discussion. We're really trying to figure out if we need to cover the filters. It does add a building-like, feature, and it's a fairly large building. Of course, we've got our 35-foot limit, but it's more roof. Prefer the irregular shaped ponds. We prefer them as well. Something that looks like it better fits the site. Let's keep going.
Actually, before we do there, Jeff, you have provided a lot of information there, and I know we've also have sent out the survey results before this meeting, but I just want to, there's a lot of new information that I think you provided, and I just wanted to see if anybody had any feedback. I don't see any hands raised or any thing in the chat, but if anybody had any questions or comments about this material that Jeff's been talking about. Dean and Pat say they are concerned about the proposed road just west of the property for the North Campus.
Just west of the property. Maybe we go backwards to look at where they're talking about on the plan. Just west of the property.
Yeah, of our property for North Campus, just west. So is that the road that you're talking about?
That's east. I think they're talking about that.
But it's west of their property, is what they're saying.
I see. I see. Yes. We've heard several comments like that. Yeah. In terms of the proximity of that road, and we're trying to appeal to Surface Nursery, and that is, that's something that is being studied right now in terms of the potential location of that road, even if it's used just for construction.
All right. Anything else from anybody else? All right. Let's go to and they say, wow, that would be really noisy. Do you have any thoughts about the noise that might be traveling down that road?
We have the same comment. We have the same comment. If it's a road that is an ingress road, you'd be coming up a hill, and if we have delivery trucks coming up that hill, you would hear them. And yes, there's opportunities to screen some of that noise with some berms beside the road, but still, that is a negative feature of having an ingress road off of Bluff Road in that location. We have the same concern.
And Pat Meyer made the comment, so if used, it would go right next to the school. And
yes, it would enter onto Bluff Road, not right next to, but almost too close to that school. Yeah, and that would need a traffic study to prove that it was either safe or not.
Pat and Dean say, so it is our understanding the South Campus does not show that road. Is that, and
I think there's going to be, yeah, when we start looking at views of the South Campus here in a second, the actual road coming in to the site and leaving the site are shown really diagrammatically at this point. We are not proposing these locations. We're just merely showing what it would look like, where it would go. They are under study right now, and the comments are good. We're going to log the comments and include it in that study.
Okay, and go ahead.
Okay, well, let's finish off on the South Campus, and then we can open it up to some more discussion here. This is kind of rotated orthogonally. In other words, it's kind of 90 degrees to north, and you can see the chemical building and the admin building and the electrical building sort of on the south side of the site instead of on the west side of the site, and it's a dominant entrance from Bluff Road. Right. So some of those things that we're showing there are parking. This one doesn't have covered filters. It places the taller buildings against a hillside. On the right-hand side, that's the tallest part of the site. And so we would sort of nestle them into the tallest part of the site, but still you'd see their roof forms from Bluff Road looking at this.
So we do have a few comments here. So I missed Pat's Fiedler. She said, would this be next to the school? And then she followed that up with, do you realize the traffic accidents that happen at that intersection? And so
no, we don't.
Yeah, so but that is a traffic study that will happen. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah, I think once I can't speak for David Peters, but I would think that once that we sort of formalize where we're going with, you know, the preferred roadways, that we would follow that up with a follow-up with the traffic study, but I'm not sure.
David, did you want to say anything about that?
Might be.
Or can you get off mute here? Yeah, I mean, they are right. I mean, there's a lot of work for us to do to figure out the traffic study. I think Jeff's point ago hit the nail on the head in terms of we have some options for moving the site and getting to the different roads. I think the important part is right now is that these are diagrammatic sketches that we're trying to get your feedback, and so your comments here are perfect. That's what we're here tonight to receive. So we understand, you know, your concerns about it being next to your property, your concerns about these intersections and your knowledge of traffic accidents in those areas. That's exactly why we're having this conversation. And Jeff mentioned we'll be taking this feedback and putting it into these studies that we'll be doing. And yes, there will be traffic studies done as we start looking at intersections where these would come out onto these major roads. All of that would be required for us to even have conversations with the counties. So yeah, that's the goal for tonight, is to continue to get your feedback. So keep passing these comments along. We really appreciate it.
And I'll just mention too that you know, we take comments all the time, and I know, Patricia, that's an issue that you've brought up to us, and you even had the suggestion of adding stop signs to that intersection, and I've passed that information along to our design team. So we do you know, whatever sort of feedback that you can give us, it's not limited to this meeting. If you have any ideas or thoughts along the way, we will, I will say too that we have the online open house coming up, and that will be another opportunity for that public feedback. But anytime you can contact me and or use our comment forms or the surveys to give us that sort of feedback. We greatly appreciate it. I just want to back up a little bit. Pat and Dean wanted to say, just remember that would be with us for 4.5 to 5 years. And I'm thinking they're referring to the construction. So even if it were to be used as a construction road, that's still a long time to hear that sort of traffic. Is that correct?
Agreed.
Am I reading that right, Pat and Dean? Yes, okay.
We agree.
All right, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, let's finish up on this particular site, and then we can kind of compare the two. Next, please. This is again showing some of their more natural shapes to these basins. I think what we're trying to do, we've heard some comments from the neighbors as well, that the basin next to Carpenter Lane is too close to Carpenter Lane. What we're really trying to do at this point is take that advice and have a larger basin in the southwest corner that addresses all the plant overflows. Jason is working with us and the civil engineer on the stormwater. And there's some innovative things going on in the stormwater here that all the other ponds, the scallop-shaped ponds in various locations are to deal with stormwater. And hopefully we can do better than what leaves the site now, even with the sort of the clay conditions of the soil. But this is sort of South Road focused, as you can see. The campus is on the south. This is rotated sort of 90 degrees. You know, where does that road go? Well, we don't really show you. But we had some positive comments about where that road was based on or compared to the other as an ingress or an egress for the site. Next, please.
Just a quick pause really quick. Patricia had another question about what is the advantage of the covered filters?
Oh, this is more about environmental conditions in an agricultural community. So there's, I think, a team of folks thinking about, you know, this is all about water quality. When the water hits the filters, this is sort of one of its last steps. And if there's blowing wind and agricultural dust and things like that based on farming in the area, it may be better to have these filters covered, but it's also a big expense. So the question is, you know, what to do? How do you weigh that expense? So we've agreed to show filters on one of these options or covers over the filters and no roofs over the other, which is more traditional in this area to have those filters exposed to the environment.
So I might add to that, Jeff, that it's also about operator safety. We recognize that this is an area that it gets colder out here in the winter than in town. And we worry about things like the water over the filter freezing and not providing effective treatment and also operator safety. We've seen several areas where snow blows under covers and things like that and make it less safe for the operators that need to be out there watching and working on the filters on a regular basis. So there's also a safety element that's being considered there as we think about those roofs.
Thanks, David. I just learned something. Okay, next slide, please. So I think this was kind of tendered by the lack of a communications tower in this view. So that's how kind of the survey results came by on this on concept screening. This one actually fared well. Next, please. And some views from various locations. This one from Carpenter Lane again, no communications tower in this view. I think there's even more trees in this view to even shield the water towers that are there. Next. Again, you can see those white building shapes on this south, pushed further down the site, a little bit south on the site, but still, you know, sticking up above the landscape without tailoring or screening or anything else at this point. But again, the trees, we're trying to get the trees in these models a little more close to what is actual, rather than just picking trees out of our library in the 3D work that we do. Next, please. This one from Bluff Road as well. You can see those sites, or excuse me, those buildings. That's the chemical building. You would see, that long bar. And yes, we can make it agrarian and Pacific Northwest, but it still would be more prominent in this particular option. So, but again, we haven't colored the buildings. We haven't made them sort of fit in. These are just site options and what they look like. Next, please. How long will it take the trees to grow to screen the site? Oh, great question. Yeah, it depends on the trees and when we plant them. I mean, there's a possibility of actually planting trees before we get, too deep into construction. And we've done that on other projects, but that is a hot topic right now in terms of what kind of trees, how fast they grow, and when will they be able to screen. So can't answer that question any better than that right now. Ben or Jason, if you've got anything to add, please do. Looking east from the neighbors, you can see Mount Hood again in its dotted form at this point. So obviously no communication tower in the way. This one was received a little bit better. Jason, did you have to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to add that we haven't determined exactly what type of trees are going to be placed in what location yet, but in the most sensitive areas, we'll probably pick something that's fast growing to try to screen as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Jason. Next, please. Okay, these comments on the South Campus: less mountain obstruction, more open space preserved, agricultural use with an 8-foot fence to keep out deer and elk. It's been discussed tonight as well. Potential community uses along the site edges. Yep, that's a hot topic as well. Roofs as low as possible. Let's see, tower along northmost common border of the two parcels. Ponds are too close to Carpenter Lane. I'm sort of cherry picking some of these things that relate to what I discussed tonight. Yes, we think so as well, and we're taking steps to try to consolidate those ponds. Let's see, Bluff Road and access from Bluff Road far enough from school. We talked about that before. Let's see here. Proximity of chemical building to admin and maintenance buildings. I think there's been some concern, especially with current news about things blowing up in other countries, that the chemical building itself is dangerous. And I think once we get into the design of this facility and start really talking about the safety measures that are in place for new facilities these days, especially chemical buildings, I think we're going to relieve your angst about that particular comment, being close to the admin building, and give you a sense of how safe this is going to be. But I think that's for another time. Maybe in the open house we have. Next page, please. I think we're getting close. So these are the two options. These are sort of next steps. We're going to have, we've been having engineering feedback that really does favor the north. And by the way, I really wonder what the surveys would say without the tower, or the tower up against the trees in some cases that we're looking at now for both these options, to see if the survey would be a little bit different. But we're taking community input. We're going to have an open house in September, a virtual open house where people are going to have a little more chance to give us feedback. I
see that Jane has a question.
Says, we did not object to the tower, but did not like the road just to our west. I hear you loud and clear.
Hello, this is Mike.
Hold on. I just want to, I'm calling on Jane first, but I got you on our radar there, Mike. But Jane had her hand raised. I just want to make sure we address her comment.
My objection to the North Campus had nothing to do with the tower, although I think the tower could be better placed, and you'll have more details later on. I did have a question as to whether or not it would be exclusive use to the Water Bureau or if it would be a general communication tower as such. And the design for me was that the South Campus was further from the edge of the bluff or the Dodge Park bluff area or hillside, which I thought offered a stronger footing and also offered expansion for a later date use.
I think let me get to the tower first. Yeah, my understanding at this point is that it is for the exclusive use of the Water Bureau. And we had some comments about, can we share in the communication aspect of that, maybe put, cell towers on it or something. I don't think there's any intention to privatize the use or have other components on this other than what is necessary for the Water Bureau only. Will it be 5G? I don't know. I don't know. So I don't think so. Dave, have you got any more feedback on the tower?
I might just add on the tower. The biggest issue with thinking about public other utilities or private utilities is security, and the intent of this tower would be secure backup to our system if we have the main lines communication line into the site. If something happens to them, this provides that backup. And so we do worry about security by having other private utilities on the site. Also, safety is another issue, having those companies climbing around on a tower that we own. And so it's things like that would likely prevent us from allowing other private utilities to be up there.
Casey,
and I might just comment also on the siting of the campuses on the site. Jane, you were talking about that and the expansion of them. Either of these campuses would be designed to the current seismic standards, and both would be designed to be up to 250 feet away from that embankment. And what our geotechnical folks are telling us is that's a safe environment that's not going to move during the seismic event. And so both of these would meet that criteria. And your comment about expansion capability, the North Campus would kind of expand back into the site, whereas the South Campus is kind of would be expanding more towards the slope to the north, where that green area is to the top of those facilities. It kind of expands into that area. So that's a little bit of feedback on your questions, and hopefully that provides some answers.
Just want to do a quick time check that we have about 10 minutes left in this meeting, and I see hands raised. I'm going to get back to you, Mike, but I just also want to note that we did want to have an opportunity for our guests to ask questions too. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and we will include you in our wrap up of before we get out of this meeting. Did you have another thing that you wanted to say, Jeff, or should we move on to?
No, this is probably a good time to start getting feedback. And David answered one of the things I was going to say. So great. Let's keep going.
Mike Coast.
Hi. If the tower is exclusive use for the Water Bureau, why can't it be used off the towers, the water towers that are there? Well, then we would never see anything. We're used to seeing the towers, the water towers.
That is a good question, and we did that. The challenge is that they're those towers aren't tall enough to see over the trees. So what we're trying to do is have a line of sight basically back up to our dams where our other facilities are located. And so the tower needs to be just a little bit taller than the trees so that we can have that line of sight.
Well, can't we put a repeater in there and not put this tower in place?
That's a good question too that I don't know the answer to, but I will take that back to our design team.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That's a good
Yeah.
suggestion. Daniel.
Yes, a couple of things. One of the reasons that I think the South Campus for me works a lot better is the area in the southeast corner is an area that we've talked about as being reserved for agriculture. And in the North Campus, not only do you have the tower, but you have a spur road and then the egress road kind of all break up an area for agriculture. And I think, as we know, with the urban growth boundary likely to continue to move, it's important to maintain the agricultural character as much as possible. So I would say, just in general, in the site design, anything you can do to maintain the space for agriculture in that area would be great. Another question or comment that I have has to do with stormwater. And I'm just wondering, with these ponds that you have, is the idea that that's going to be the only place that stormwater is going to drain? In other words, you're going to have pipes underneath the impervious areas and they're all going to drain to ponds? Or are you going to have some BMPs that are going to attempt to drain some of the stormwater much closer to the source of the stormwater?
Yeah. Can we have our landscape architect respond to that? That's going to be a better person to answer.
Absolutely. Yeah, we didn't really discuss too much the whole stormwater strategy for the site, but we are looking at trying to design conveyance swales alongside most of the roads to capture stormwater right next to paved areas and try to treat that as close to the source as possible. Then those swales, our plan is to use those to direct the stormwater to more intermediate facilities to be held and treated before finally being in large events, before finally being shifted down to those larger stormwater ponds that are shown at the lower portions of the site. So we are going to try to capture and treat as much as possible, as close to the source as possible.
Okay, thank you. I think that's definitely the right way to go. And the city of Gresham has recently updated their stormwater standards, and they've used the same philosophy, and it's working pretty well.
Excellent.
Great.
All right, let's go to Sean.
One other thing that Casey just mentioned here that I should bring up is that we are considering green roofs as well on some of the structures, and that will help with some of the stormwater strategy. Thanks, Casey.
Point. Sean.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so looking at the South Campus, you're talking about a permanent road coming from the south to the north from Bluff Road, is that correct? I've always been told it would just be a construction road, but if I look at the South Campus design, it looks like you guys want a main entrance coming in from Bluff Road north that would be permanent. Is that correct?
On the South Campus, that was the thought.
Okay. Now, Dean and Pat Walters, of course, want it away from their house, which I totally agree. Who wants that house? Who wants it near their property line? But the farther west you go, that runs right through the middle of our farm. And I'm just wondering how you're going to address that, because that would be a major impact to us. Not to take it lightly what the Walters would have to go through. I'm totally on their side about that. But as a farming and a business, I just can't imagine this thing going through the middle of our field permanently.
Yep. David, go ahead.
Yeah. We understand that comment. We've heard you talk about that and your desire to be to the east. I think those are again comments that we're capturing and providing to our engineers also. There's a lot to kind of work out in terms of what those accesses are, and actually we just got a team started last week to really sit down and talk about that. And they have a meeting set up with Multnomah County to start having conversations about what tie-ins to the roads look like and things like that. So we are taking the Walters comments. We hear your comments, and we're gonna take all of that and give to our designers so that we can come up with an option that tries to meet all the needs here.
Is there somebody that I can talk to directly, more specific about this particular road, or just wait for the next meeting, or what's the best way to go forward at my point?
You mean about a road down through the middle of your property?
Well, just a permanent road, whether it's on the very far east end or through the middle of the property. I've always been told, you know, we're talking about a construction road, and after 3 to 5 years, whatever it is, it goes away and we're back to normal again. But if the South Campus is requiring a permanent road, I'd kind of like to know who I could talk to, you know, more in depth about this.
Can I get back to you on that, Sean?
Sure. Yeah.
I'll get you a name and someone to talk to some more about that, and to get that input. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so I just wanted to back up a little bit to Pat Meyer had the comment, so it's just as a backup, and I'm thinking that you're referring to the cell tower. Is that what you were, what exactly were you referring to as a backup?
Yes, it was referring to the cell tower, and I was kind of piggybacking off what Mike Coast had asked, which was, you know, utilizing some of the existing structures that are there, partially to, you know, to create that. My concern is that it becomes a general public use communication tower. It's one thing if it's private to the PWB, but yeah, so that was kind of my question.
Okay, and I think we had addressed that, but did Dave or Jeff, did you want to add anything to that, what you've already said?
No, you know, just today there was a meeting with the committee that's sort of, or a group of people that are looking at the visual impacts of this tower and where it should be. All of the information they gave me at this meeting, which I saw for the first time, is a much less obtrusive form or tower that would be placed up against, more up against the tree line. And we've actually got a site meeting tomorrow where we're looking at a couple different locations where it would potentially be more optimal, as opposed to at the top of the hill here, and it's such a prominent location blocking mountain views. So I think we've shown you how bad it could be, and hopefully the next time you see this, you'll be a little more relieved.
All right, we are out of time, or just about out of time, and I would want to make sure we talk to Pat. He had his hand raised. Pat Holt.
Yeah, I'll make it quick as possible here. So in looking at these two maps, I see you have contour lines on there, but you can't really read anything about elevation on there. On the west side of the city property, it appears that you're going to be filling that big gully in pretty much all the way, so the property is level from north to south. Is that correct?
Pat, that's a finished water reservoir. That is the lowest point on the site, and to fill in the whole gully, or the draw as we call it, is that's what's being shown in these. I'm not sure that's going to be the ultimate strategy, but what's your comments on that?
Oh, I'm just curious. I mean, you know, like I said before, it's it's all flows right to me, and I know that the bioswales and the green roofs and everything else slows the flow of runoff water and everything else. You can't stop at 100% in a major event. So, and then just looking at that, just looking at it also, I'm looking at if you're going to fill that to a level grade across from front to back or north to south. Just wondering if that's the case, because that's a lot of soil movement.
It sure is. And
No,
there's an easement.
maybe I can make a couple comments there.
Sure.
You know, part of, especially with the North Campus, what we attempted to do is take advantage of that draw, because our process is a gravity process. So the water flows downhill naturally. So we have the processes at the head of the treatment system, the highest point where the water starts, and then it flows downhill by gravity to the lowest point. So we've attempted to use that topology on that site to mimic that. So yes, we are kind of filling in that gap with our treatment processes to take advantage, and would actually be less excavation on a whole for that North Campus than there would be for that South Campus, I believe, is what we learned a little while ago. Just because of that, we're just better taking advantage of the natural topography of the site. Does that kind of answer that question?
Yeah, it kind of did. I just, I don't know that most people realize the elevation discrepancies from north to the center of the draw and to the south side of the property. I mean, it's from the bottom part of the draw to the south side of the property, it's probably a good 70-foot elevation difference in there, I suspect, is it not?
I want to say it was more like 40. I thought it was like 750 at the high point and about 710 in that draw. And it goes a little deeper down by Johnson Creek. But
yeah, down there it does. I mean, it drops off considerably. Maybe it's because you're going to excavate the top of that southern part off or something and made it a little more towards 40. But I've shot it all with transits and so forth before for my irrigation lines. So it's quite a bit. Yeah. So it's somewhere between 40 and 70. You're right.
We're trying to take advantage of that with our construction to minimize the excavation. So we are looking at those types of things.
I think,
okay,
Pat,
thanks.
Pat, I don't mean I remember you being out there on a rainy day one day.
Oh, yes. Came and accosted you. I don't know what you're doing.
Right. Hopefully we pass the test. But yeah, I think what your other issue is, or the other thing that you're concerned about is really, how much water goes into your site. And what, if our permitting folks say, match stormwater conditions in terms of water that leaves the site, then I think what you're saying is that the existing conditions are not necessarily acceptable to you. There's too much water.
Currently, yes, and when you start adding in asphalt and roof lines and everything else, it creates a lot more runoff than what is currently there. And the soil drains very well, but it only drains so much. So yeah, I do have a big concern for that. And plus, a lot of soil movement, and as long as the compaction is right, it should contain everything. That's what your guys' job is to do. But still, there is concern there.
Well, I think you suggested it tonight that we come talk to you, and we come talk to other people that are impacted by stormwater on site. So I think we're going to do that. So thanks for suggesting it.
Yep, you got it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. That was a really great conversation. A lot of good feedback from our group here. And so I just wanted to move on to what's happening next. And we have in September, we'll take a break from the site advisory group meetings, and we'll be hosting an online open house that will go over the topics that we covered over the last 6 months with the site advisory group. And so we appreciate your feedback, and all that sort of feedback we'll have on, incorporated into this online open house. And hopefully we can get some more folks feedback within the neighborhood. So I'm hoping that we can help you will help us spread the word, because we have some tools planned to get the word out. We'll be sending out information about it, but really word of mouth is the best marketing tool that we could ask for. So after that, we will be talking about the facility operations in October, and then in November, moving on to the construction phase, which I know you all are interested in learning more about too. So thank you for everybody for attending this meeting, and I just turn back over to David to any last words.
I do want to say thank you again. As Benita pointed out, this was an awesome conversation. This is the type of conversation that we were hoping to have, and we'd like to continue that conversation. So, feel free to give us a call, email us, participate in the open house. We'd just like to keep that information coming over the next couple months, so that we can give our designers the best feedback we can going forward. So we appreciate your participation. We appreciate you taking time out of your evening today to be with us, and look forward to, I guess, talking to you again in October. So hope you enjoy the rest of the summer and are able to stay cool this weekend. So take care.